your space to grab onto it once again, because the reality is hope cannot be taken from you. It can only be surrendered. My name is Daniel. I'm a pastor here at Venture Church, and I lead the Celebrate Recovery Ministry, which is currently in exile. Our Celebrate Recovery Ministry has small groups, which will run tonight. Those will meet from 6:45. If you have an interest in that, you've never participated in that, drop a message below, and one of our leaders will connect you to it and get you an invitation to the group. This right here is not Celebrate Recovery. We're calling this Recovering Hope, and it's a space where we as a church can walk out both. We're calling a Monday school, kind of a practical application of the message from the weekend, as well as recovery themes. This is a place to talk about hard things. This is a place to deal with weakness. And this is a place for right now. Okay, so yesterday, Pastor Brandon kicked off our new Venture sermon series, Supernatural. It is amazing. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to go back and check out his message from yesterday. In that message, he shared the story of the calling of Elisha. Now, you can find this in 1 Kings 19 through 21. Again, that's 1 Kings 19 through 21. In it, you find the prophet Elijah, not Elisha, who is a very notable and renowned prophet of God. Like, he is the man. And he, in this instance, he's calling a farmer, a man who is not the man, who is to this moment unknown, and his name is Elisha, and that can be confusing, Elijah and Elisha, into walking with, serving, and following him. Now, Brandon's message is told about the parallel between the calling of how Elijah calls into Elisha's life in a very unexpected way, and the similarity to that into how God, in the person of Jesus, calls us. And it's a really good point. And there's points where when Jesus gets a hold of you, that happens unexpectedly. 2, that when he does, you get to make a decision to participate with that or not. And 3, the only way forward is to not turn back. And it's all true, 110%. It's an awesome message about how you and I are invited to respond to Jesus' call into our lives. It is supernatural stuff. Tonight, we're doing the opposite. We're going to do the super practical, not the supernatural. Tonight, we're going to talk about how to stay on course with Pastor Brandon's third point and not turn back, with the help of the people that God brings into our lives to walk this out. This is something for all of us. This is something that all of us need to do. It does not matter if you are 5 days off of heroin or a perfectionistic careerist soccer parent that's never missed church. It's the same invitation into becoming better, though our betters may look very different in the short term depending on the life you've lived. Because, guys, the danger for all of us is the same, and that danger is that we stop short to find a space where our lives look better but don't actually get better. None of us want that. Plenty of us find that. I certainly have in my moments here and there. So we're going to look at how our relationships with others can help us move through that and keep that going forward. Because here's the truth. Jesus came to you unexpectedly. You made the decision to walk with him, and you've decided not to turn back. But now you have to walk that out. So Pastor Brandon mentioned yesterday how Elijah needed Elisha to see out his mission, to realize the eradication of Baal worship in the people of Israel. And that's very true. But I want to switch that perspective around. And I'd like to look at the perspective of Elisha. See, he was just a farmer. He wasn't worried about Baal worship. Or if he was more worried about his oxen, because that's the thing he was doing. He was a dude. So in that moment, when Elijah called him, he didn't know how to be a man of God. Elisha needed Elijah to learn how. He needed teaching. He needed direction. He needed discipleship. This is the most Christian thing in the world. One person discipling another. None of us do this alone. We all need people. Hebrews 12:1 tells us, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. That therefore at the beginning indicates a truth, something that we can hang on to. And that truth here is that this crowd of witnesses will enable us to run this race as we would want to get where we want to go. Get a crowd of witnesses, get where you want to go. And here's the thing, Elisha had a destination, and so do you. He could not have gotten there without Elijah. Your crowd of peeps will be just as important to you. Mine certainly have in my life. But it's so easy to skip it with Elisha. Can you imagine for just 1 second if he was too proud to receive it? Can't you picture it? I can do this on my own. I don't need you. Yeah, that's going to work out great. Or what if he disqualified himself? I'm not worthy to follow Elijah. Or maybe he was saying in his head, I can't do it. You don't know who I've been. What would happen then? For Elisha? Not much. Now, Elijah would have moved on. Elijah had things to do. He was on a mission. Elisha would have been stuck. And he may never have known what was missing. Because we tend to reinforce our choices with false stories, don't we? Come on, can't you hear him in your head? I didn't need Elijah. Wait till they'll see what I accomplish on my own, he might say year after year as he followed his oxen. Or maybe he would have heard about the amazing things Elijah would do in the following days, and he'd say, see, it's for the best that I wasn't there. I would have screwed that up for him. I sacrificed so that he would have succeeded. Sound familiar? Right. The reality is that we are called, all of us, to disciple one another to Christ, to give away the gifts we've been given and to receive from those in a position to give the gifts they've been given. This model is seen again and again and again in the Bible. Moses and Joshua, Paul and Timothy, Jesus in every single life he ever touched, including yours, and Elijah and Elisha. Nobody does it alone. God had a plan for Elijah in fulfilling his calling by discipling and enabling Elisha to take over that mission that he'd been given. And God had a plan for Elisha, and it was to be found in his following and learning from Elijah. You know, later we're going to see that there's this pivotal moment that comes after they've been walking for a while where Elisha asks for Elijah's blessing and he receives it. And that could not have happened without first having had the courage to follow him and the humility to serve. You know who else God has a plan for? You. You, 100% you. Me, all of us. God is super dependable in this. He has a group of people that he has chosen to help you walk this out. That's a fact. And in doing so, you're going to be a blessing to those people. And then someday, with people you don't know yet, you're going to be a blessing to them. And those are going to be people that resemble who you are right now. And some of you just had a bunch of very negative thoughts. Oh, I can't be a blessing. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. Or I don't need their help. I'm smarter than them anyways. Okay. I get both of these perspectives. A couple of points. First off, that's not true. If you had those thoughts, I want you to take a close look at it. Those thoughts of being too cool for school or too broken to participate are a prison that is designed to keep you in isolation. And I get it. I do. I've lived both of those places. And the path to freedom from there involves prayer and a willingness to invite people in. And one way or another, you're going to have to take a step. There's no avoiding it. But here's what I've seen again and again and again. If you're willing to take one step, God will likely show up and take three. But it involves you opening that door. And number two, they're the same thing. There is no functional difference between a false and imprisoning sense of worthlessness and uselessness and the extreme edge of self-righteousness and arrogance. They both isolate you from teachers and peers, and they both direct you towards poor decisions and a fall. And I get that as a culture, we're more tolerant of the individual who's imprisoned in worthlessness than we are of the arrogant. I'm not saying we should lose our empathy for those lacking self-esteem. Quite the opposite. I'm saying we need to extend our empathy to those trapped in a false narrative of superiority. It's just as much a prison. They are trapped just the same. And if that's you, I get it. I really do. I hurt for you. I've lived in that prison. And there is freedom, there is humility, there is being right-sized for all of us. And some of us need to humble down, and some of us need to humble up. And I get that this stuff may sound kind of radical. It kind of is, but it doesn't make it any less true. So maybe you've done terrible things, really terrible things. You've hurt people. You've stolen things. You've lied unbelievably terrible lies for selfish purposes. Okay. Maybe you've been so good in so many ways, but you're hurting and broken inside, and no one can see it, and you can't say it because that story about how good you are is just too important, a story that you need people to believe, but can't live out. Sure, I get that. You know what? It's okay, because it doesn't really matter what you did yesterday. I mean, it does. You have to deal with it, but Jesus is very much a right now kind of guy. Revelation 3:20, he says, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." Present tense, right now. So if that's you, be invited. Open the door right now and let the man in. And then deal with whatever came just before or long ago, and then do that and let him lead you to his family, the people of the kingdom of God. Now, in Celebrate Recovery, this is often referred to as Forever Family. Tell you a secret? That's not really about Celebrate Recovery. Not at all. The Forever Family is about every single follower of Jesus ever. John 1, 12-13 says, "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." Romans 12:5 says, "So we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually one members of another." Forever Family is very helpful language that someone put together to help newcomers into Celebrate Recovery, especially those who feel outside of things or unworthy, to come home and grab on. And if that's you, I get that. That's awesome. Welcome. Feel free to start here. Now, especially because, that can be so helpful, because we can start with people that have a similar story to us, that speak the same language as us, and it makes perfect sense that you be more comfortable. Feel free to stay here and serve here and grow here and lead here. There's nothing wrong with that. The workers are few and the harvest is full, and it's good. Heck, it's my own story. But you're not stuck here. You don't have to stop here. Your Forever Family is huge. It is billions of people. It is the whole of the church. And the reason I say that is because I think that if we're not careful with that, we can put limitations on what God can or will do in our life. He may have wonderful things he wants to invite us into. Who knows where God will take you if you let him? Because God has a plan for you. It doesn't end with you stopping your bad behavior. Stopping your bad behavior is the beginning of the story, not the ending. How sad if you stop there. I get that it's the thing that if you have a lust issue you're dealing with that's destroying your marriage, it's hard to think about anything else but fixing the thing that needs fixing. Okay. If you're so enmeshed in your loved ones' lives that you can't see your own and you know it, it's a crisis. I very much understand, but stopping, that's just the start. And for those of you that are wrestling with that space of stopping right now, I just want to encourage you. Keep on. Participate in groups. Later, we're going to talk about the people we invite into our lives. Take those steps because life is big. This is not about stopping bad behavior. It's a bigger question that's, are you open to a life bigger than where you are right now? And are you open to the people of God leading you into that as God brings them into your life? Can you have the courage to follow and the humility to hear? And then can you have the honesty to acknowledge and deal with it the 519th time that you fail to have that courage and humility? Okay. So our story thus far. We've walked through this across several weeks, that we need to recognize we cannot do it ourselves, that we need God, to surrender to God, and then to walk out giving our lives to God in practicality, in confession and relationship. We've looked at Job. We've looked at Joshua, Jesus, and others across these last few weeks, and we've looked at very clearly that it all starts with the need to get on our face and worship God. That's where things begin. And from there, we're able to dive into the need to build and walk out relationships with other people. And last week, we talked about confession. And that's very vital, and it's real. And the confession is this 1-2 punch that enables grace in your life, where you find forgiveness from God and healing as you expose yourself to other people. But you know what? You have to have someone to confess to, or it doesn't really work. Doing this in isolation just doesn't function. So we're going to dive into the pragmatics, and we're going to look at some of these relationships that we need to find out and walk out everything that God has for us. Now, a couple of notes regarding you and I and the Elisha story. Number one, if God sends you someone who throws a cloak on you, great. But that doesn't happen to most people. And if that does happen, I would urge you to consider that and pray about that carefully and to seek the wisdom of others on that subject. Don't forget, Proverbs 11:14 tells us, where there is no counsel, people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And two, if you're like most of us, you're going to have to ask people. Don't get hurt at how special Elisha's story was. Don't forget, Pastor Brandon used it as a metaphor for how unique and powerful and unexpected Jesus' work in our own lives is. Most of us have to seek these relationships out. If no one threw a cloak on you, don't be resentful about it, because that's what happens with most of us. So this is the space where we get to do our part. He is at the door, and we opened it. He's here. He's here in every area of our life. He came unexpectedly. We made this decision to follow him, and we don't want to turn back. And now you get to be a part of that in a big way. And so it's all about finding and inviting the people in will help guide you on that journey forward. If you're willing to accept it so, it's just this amazing adventure. Are you willing to participate in a story like you've always wanted to have? In a narrative that makes Hollywood look cheesy and contrived, as he brings the crowd of people around you that are your heroes and guides and friends and counselors. So that's what we're going to look at today. 5 types of people that we can all benefit from in our lives as we walk out the message from Hebrews 12:1 and lean on this crowd of witnesses. These are people to look for and invite in as you get to know the family of God. So people we all need. Number 1, we need a pastor. I cannot imagine doing this without a pastor because I didn't. Long before I had anything resembling surrender or recovery, God sent me a man that I could follow badly and learn from weekly, who was patient and did what he could to give me what he had. Someone to take on the burden and the responsibility of shepherding me through seasons of growth, challenge, and change, as I walked sometimes very slowly and sometimes regressively towards Jesus. This was my pastor. You would not believe what he tolerated from me in the pursuit of his calling. I was exactly the guy who had none of the humility and all of the fear, and I was intolerable. I am the worst, I swear I'm the worst possible example of this. I remember one time I turned to him and I made it really clear that I was kind of offended that he was my pastor, and I wanted him to be my friend. Mind you, I had no sense of what a friend could be or should be at that point in time. And it was really because I just was wildly insecure and needed approval. And he looked me right in the eye and said, "You don't want me to be your friend. As a friend, I wouldn't tolerate this, this, and this. You want me to be here for you. You want me to be a pastor." And he was right. Now, my arrogance and ego couldn't admit it in that time of life. I'm hoping you're in a better situation, but inviting someone into your life in this role of a pastor, of a shepherd, is vital. Church, can I suggest that you could benefit from a pastor in your life? 2, you don't just need a pastor, you can also benefit from a mentor. It's another role that we can have in our cloud of witnesses as wise men or women who serve as mentors, people of wisdom. Proverbs 3:21 says, "My son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion." What that means is you got to seek it. You got to hang on to it. You got to want it. And mentors can bring it to you. And you know what? Sometimes people get stuck here. They maybe have a sponsor or a pastor, and they don't understand how they can have more people than that. Or maybe the people they have guiding them don't like that. Can I be very blunt? Any person that insists on being the only person is the wrong person. Any person that is more interested in discipling you to themselves rather to Jesus is the wrong person. Any person that does what they can best they can to encourage you towards finding good people and always point you towards Jesus, even if they're not perfect, you know what? They really don't hurt to add to the crowd. You can have a mentor. You can have 5. They can even disagree with each other. It can get exciting. That's okay. Your mentors, pastors, and sponsors are all, every single one of them, broken people that need Jesus, just like you do. And the very dependable ones will be able to say that and mean that right up front. But that's not enough. You don't just need a pastor and a mentor. You also need a friend. Now, I never had friends. I didn't know how to have friends. All that I really wanted was for people to approve of me so that I could feel better about all the bad things I was doing. And ironically, this is what I meant when I spoke to my pastor in that story I told you just a minute ago. I wanted him to say, "You're fine how you are." And it wasn't true. And you know what? That's not what a friend is anyways. A good friend won't say, "You're fine how you are." Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." That's a friend. Does that sound like it's lacking conflict? No, it's not, and it isn't. A good friend will encourage you towards becoming who you can while accepting you are with love. A good friend will call you out. A good friend will put your well-being above what you think of them. And be careful of folks that won't do this. You want friends in your life that will point you towards where you want to go. And as you walk with these people, these pastors and mentors, don't be surprised if in time they become friends. It is amazing what will happen in your life if you just don't quit. That simple aspect of endurance and perseverance, which is the very aspect Pastor Brandon referenced to the person of Christ in his message on Easter, and it's exactly what we were talking about before when we're called to this cloud of witnesses so we can run this race with endurance and see it to the finish line. But you can't stop there. You also need peers. Ecclesiastes 4:12 tells us that though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. And a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Why not 7? Build a network. You. Will you all walk with me? We're similar. Can I text you? Is that okay? Am I annoying? Good, fine. Can I text you anyways? Can you live with that? You do you. I'll do me. I used to be so frightened of rejection. Sometimes we have to walk through that. If that's you, I get it. And that can come back and haunt me sometimes. That's definitely a weak spot in my walk. That's okay. We all have to deal with who we are. I think if you find that if you look for it, there will be people all around you that'll be your peers, that will be, if you ask, an accountability partner to you. I encourage you tonight, go into one of these Celebrate Recovery small groups. Let people know. Let people know where you are. Beyond that, we can all use a pastor, we can all use a mentor, we can all use a friend, we all need peers, and we can also all use a sponsor. And you know what? If you're here and you're hearing this language, you're in luck. Most people don't even know it's a thing. They don't. Like 95% of the church has no clue what a sponsor is. Won't make sense. The thing is like, is it like someone who's sponsoring a race? Like you put your logo on something? And no, that's not what I mean. This is something you get to have. And I very much understand you may not like what brought you here. Okay. You might not like your story up to this point. Sure. My story was really ugly. The amount of hurt I had to walk through to break my monstrous ego to the point where I could surrender into the idea of a sponsor was profound. May God save you from being as difficult as me. But grab onto this. Grab onto this. A sponsor is something you're only going to find talked about in the space of recovery, and it is such an amazing tool. And here's what a sponsor is in its nutshell. It's someone that you pick and invite that's walked through the toolkit of recovery before you to guide you through it. That's it. That's the whole thing. Now from there, it's all about the structure, that we have this amazing gift we've been given in these 12 steps of being able to follow a roadmap towards surrender of our lives to Jesus. And this is something, again, and we've talked about this every week. This is something every Christian's been invited in since time started. Even before Christ, the advent of Christ as a person, you still see this mapped out in the lives of believers before him. This walk into Jesus. And now in this very busy mechanical day and age, God has given us a gift of this superstructure that we can lean on. And I'm telling you what a sponsor is a sponsor is someone who has the map. A sponsor is someone who has walked the path. A sponsor is someone that can help enable this to be 12 steps instead of 40 years in the desert, if you're willing. Sure, I understand that some sponsors are more. Some sponsors become like amazing guides and mentors and pastors and friends, but some are just there to help you in that moment. And you know what? Some pastors are more. Some pastors will be these incredibly robust relationships and some won't. And some friends are more. That's why it's so important to gather this crowd of witnesses to God's way of doing things to you. But you know what? If you're new and you're wrestling with stopping, this probably all sounds like a lot. I get that. I remember when I had none of these things. Not one. Well, I had a pastor, but I hadn't been listening to him. I had to take a step. And maybe you do too. And that's okay. Any amazing journey, any adventure is just a bunch of steps strung together. So there's a couple practical things you can do to get started right now. One, you can pray. Simplest, most effective thing you could possibly do. I mean, like if you're hearing me and you're like, I want that, why isn't that happening to me? Have you asked God for it? Have you taken that step? Sound a little silly? Ask him in. Tell him what you want. Ask God to send you the right people and then open your eyes. How sad the man that begs for a miracle and then rejects it when it comes because it doesn't meet his expectations. 2, you can share. Join one of our CR small groups in just a moment, starting at 6:45, and let people know you need connection. Be honest about where you're at. And 3, and probably most important, other than prayer, is you can ask. Take a step and message someone and let them know you'd like to talk to them. Will you be my friend? Can I call you? Can I text you? Is that okay? And then you have to do it. For the record, the acquisition of a phone number that is not used, I will accept that that is progress, but it is not the end in itself. So maybe you want a pastor to walk with you. Maybe you want a mentor to speak into your life. Maybe you want a friend to hear you. Maybe you need all the above. You know what? I have an amazing cloud of witnesses. I have more people than I ever would have believed. If I'm going to tell you anything about my story, other than the acts of grace that God has given me, it is going to be the cloud of witnesses and how phenomenal they are. The sounding board, the teachers, the friends, the peers. I was so lonely for so long. If that's you, I have to tell you, it doesn't have to be that way. It can change, and you can have this too. God, for everyone that's listening, please enable them to take steps to gather just a crowd of witnesses, pastors and friends and mentors and teachers and sponsors and peers, so they can walk forward knowing your grace, and most importantly, being able to share that with others. Lord, we trust you, and we need you, and we absolutely depend on you to make these more than words, to work in our lives. Amen. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. If you're looking to a space to do any of this, I know I've mentioned it before, but make sure to attend one of our CR small groups that are starting in just a few minutes. These groups are amazing. We have incredible servant leaders here at Venture. I believe you will be blessed by participating. Make sure to make a note right now in the comment feed. Someone will get you an invitation into one of these groups. And bear in mind, the groups are always divided by topic and gender, and they're carefully structured to ensure that you have a safe place. That you have a safe place to share, and you'll find that as you step into that, these leaders are really careful to make sure that these things are run right. So if you'd like to participate, drop that in the comments below, and please be sure to tune in next week, Monday at 6 p.m. as we continue to dive into what a life lived out in surrender looks like in recovering hope. And as always, thanks for letting me share.